Joshua seems to be sort of the one that has the weight of the world on his shoulders, when really it should be Usyk. So it's interesting to see that.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Another Round. I am myself, Mike Thomas, and I've got my co-host Hamza Hanif. We're going to go over a couple of big ones today. It's the first day or so of summer. There's lots of barbecues this evening, so I hope you've got some ribs sizzling on the barbecue because we've got some sizzling fights to go over. We're going to go over Sam Eggington versus Zysk. I hope I pronounced that right. The big Pole, #1 Polish super welterweight. That's coming up this weekend. Then we're also going to go over the fight that just got announced today between Jake Paul, Tommy Fury on the 6th of August. So we're going to go over that one. And then we're also going to go over recently AJ and Usyk have been having a bit of a stare down in Saudi Arabia. So that's all going.
Rage on the Red Sea.
Rage on the Red Sea. So it's all going down, my friend. And so let's start off with Eggington versus Zysk. Whenever I think about Eggington, I always think about Ted Cheeseman. And one thing you know about Ted Cheeseman versus Eggington is that was a major, major fight. Them two, when you get some egg and you get some cheese, bro, it's never a disappointment.
Them two, perfect combo.
Them two can fight like you wouldn't believe. And one thing about Sam Eggington is he never has a bad fight. I don't think I've ever seen him in a bad fight ever, because he just throws himself to the wind. He throws everything at the other guy. He has a complete lack of regard for his own face. And he just blocks the punches with his own face. But I think it's going to be a big fight. Zysk is obviously undefeated, never lost a fight, 18 wins, 6 knockouts, I believe. And so that's going to be interesting. What do you think, mate? What do you think?
I'm super, super excited for this fight. Just because, as you correctly said, I mean, I couldn't have said it any better than you just did, to be honest. Sam Eggington is never, ever in a disappointing fight. Mm-hmm. Even his last fight was amazing. It was like fight of the year. It was class. So he always comes to fight. And I was about to say as well about Zysk. He's as you said as well, he's the top Polish super welterweight.
Polish fighters, man, is they always come to fight, and I think it's just got all the hallmarks of a great fight. Do you know what I mean? Because them two are not going to back down. We know for a fact that, you know, he's #1 for a reason. He's never lost a fight, so he's coming in with that ego bravado that he's never lost. Sam Eggington has been around for a long, long time. I think he's been around since like 2012 when London hosted the Olympics. He's been around so long, man. He knocked out Paulie Malignaggi. That's how long he's been fighting, bro. And obviously he's taken a few losses, but he's got massive amounts of experience in the bag. Hundreds of rounds that he's fought. I think over 200 rounds he's had. So he's been around. He's a lot more experienced than the Polish guy, Zysk, but you know, it's still going to be a good fight. I'm excited for it.
I was going to say as well, you have to give Sam Eggington massive respect, because he always seems to be in these absolute wars. And Zysk and his previous opponent both are completely unbeaten as well before Sam Eggington. So he's always in tough, sort of eye-catching fights. So I'm excited to watch that one.
Yeah, and I think also there's potential in this fight for the winner of this one to kind of push on up the ladder of the rankings of the super welterweights, because right now I think you've got the younger of the two Charlo twins as #1. He's #1 ranked, but I think there's room. I don't know if he's going to move up as well, but I think there's room for Eggington to kind of have like an Indian summer, if you like, talking of summers, but to come back and have like a revival of his career, because he's only, despite the length of time that he's been in this game, I think he's only 28, 29, right? So he still got another 5 years or so if he wants to have kind of like a good end to his career and kind of push on. I think it's a good time for him. and I think he's in the right weight division for it as well.
No, absolutely. The world's his oyster, you know, especially if he wins this one.
Good. Also announced today, Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury. I'm really excited about this fight. It's going to be on Showtime in the US. 6th of August, it's been announced at Madison Square Garden, New York. Massive proper venue for two relatively kind of novice fighters. You know, Jake Paul's getting his first fight against a real boxer, like everyone says, been telling him, hammering him to fight a real boxer. Now he's got his chance. Tommy Fury, you know, this is probably going to be the most money he will ever make in a fight. He might argue, might have a rematch, I don't know. But right now he's going to potentially make $2 million from this fight with Jake Paul, which is way, you know, like 4 times more than he's ever earned. And it's major. It's going to be a mega fight, mate. It's going to probably get a lot of people watching it, a lot of casuals watching it too. This is probably the first time that professional boxing and YouTube have actually officially crossed the line against each other in a proper fight. So what do you think, mate? What are your thoughts on that?
I think it's a super intriguing fight. Just because for all of the reasons you've just mentioned. You know, they are two novice boxers, but the mad thing is this fight is pay-per-view. You know, it's going to make massive money, and it's super intriguing as well because with Jake Paul, he's been fighting people who are relatively like him. Because you know what it is, you have to understand. Like Jake Paul started boxing 3 years ago, and he's went from fighting boxing 3 years ago, seemingly with no like experience outside of that. He was just straight up YouTubing. And then went into that, and then now he's fighting Tommy Fury. Do you know what I mean? Professionally, and he's got a contract. He's got a fight contract with.
You know, Tommy Fury's been around and he's fought a lot more than Jake Paul, but actually, he's only really started fighting professionally in 2018, and before that, he hasn't got an amateur background that's been recorded, you know, anywhere. So he's not that much more experienced than Jake Paul. He's only had 8 fights. Jake Paul's had, you know, will be his 5th fight, I believe, or his 6th fight coming up will be his 6th fight. So he's had 8 and Jake Paul's had 5. And if you look at the rounds, because I always go off the rounds rather than the years that I've been in, you know, Tommy Fury's had 24 rounds and Jake Paul's had 18 rounds of boxing. So there's not a lot in it. You know, there's not a lot in it at all.
The thing is as well, like when you go into boxing the way I assume Tommy Fury has, it's been a little bit different to the way Jake Paul has. Like usually you tend to fight people who are the same size as you, who are young like you, you know, like you tend to be a bit more evenly matched. You don't tend to be fighting people who are like smaller or older. It does happen, but it's never like heavy sparring or anything. I think it's gonna be a great fight because obviously we don't know what's going to happen. Like Jake Paul seems to have this ability with the right hand to just be able to knock people out, and obviously it is relatively sort of unskilled people. Like the YouTuber that he got that really massive knockout with, that guy just ran at him. Like I don't even think he'd actually sparred. Do you know what I mean? The NBA player. So it's but obviously he was losing that fight against Tyron Woodley, and he was cutting stuff like that, which does show that he has a sort of a fighter's mentality. He was still looking for the knockout whilst he was cut, you know, and he got it, and he delivered that knockout as well. So it's you have to give him credit because he's doing what people said you should have done from the start. You should have done the traditional way of where you fight people who are actual boxers who are trying to make it as professional boxers, and you fight them and you move up the ranks. So we're gonna have to see what happens because I think it's a 60-40 fight in Tommy's favor, because I do think, despite, you know, him not having an amateur record, I do think he's been probably hit. I assume John Fury's had him hitting pads and moving around the caravan park. Do you know what I mean? Like flipping and dodging and you know what I mean? Like I just think he does come from a family of fighters, and I think he was probably introduced to the fight game.
He's grew up around it. His whole family's a huge boxing family, and Jake Paul's been fighting YouTubers. I get what you're saying, but at the same time as well, like if none of Tommy Fury's guys that he's fought in the actual ring has hit him back or given him any much of a challenge, then it's not really much different than fighting YouTubers, because they're not fighting him back. They're just there to be. They're just in the way. Do you know what I mean? He's just coming in.
The last guy that he fought as well. The last guy that Tommy Fury fought. Not the last one. Do you know the guy that he fought on the undercard of the Jake Paul fight?
The American, Anthony Taylor, when he was in America.
That was a really bad performance for Tommy Fury, that fight.
Really bad from him. And that's why I'm saying I think this is more of a 50-50 fight. If you'd have asked me before that fight and he'd have gone on and knocked the last two guys out convincingly in the first couple of rounds, then I would have said, 60-40 to Tommy Fury. But based on his last performance against a guy, Anthony Taylor, who's 5'5", the guy is tiny. Tommy Fury's 6 foot. And he just couldn't deal with him. Like he looked he looked terrible, man. Didn't look great. So I'm behind him. I want it to be a good fight, but also his last few performances, he's been talking the talk, but he's not been walking the walk, and he's not been putting the performances in that really he should be if he's going to convincingly beat Jake Paul. If this was on the other side of though, Jake Paul knows how to talk. If this was about trash talking, about just promotion, marketing, Jake Paul would win hands down every time, because he knows how to market himself. He knows what to say. He knows how to get into, Tommy Fury's head and annoy him. He's put out a video today on YouTube, which I thought was quite funny, the first 10 minutes or so. He's very clever. He's very good at that. And I think the fight, I can see if the main question to me is who's got the best chin, because it's whoever lands first and then who's able to take a punch. I don't know if Tommy Fury can take a punch, because he's never even been in a fight where anyone's punched him. Do you know what I mean? Anyone's given him a test on his chin. And the same with Jake Paul. Like we saw it with Tyron Woodley in the first fight, where he rocked him through the ropes, but he didn't get the opportunity to kind of capitalize that against Jake Paul. So we don't know either of them can take a punch. We don't know how how resistant they are to an onslaught. So that's going to be interesting. And then again, if nobody gets knocked out and it goes to points, me personally, I think it's going to go to Jake Paul, just given the fact that it's in America, it's at Madison Square Garden, it's probably American judges, and I think they'll probably give it to him, given the amount of money that he draws every time and how valuable he is to Showtime. So I think that's probably how I see it, but it's still going to be very interesting, mate. I'm excited.
Yeah, definitely. Me too, because there's a lot of unknowns about Jake Paul. He certainly displayed a very sort of braggadocious to the point of sort of delusion in some of the things that he said about boxing and about the champions in boxing. So it's going to be interesting to see him actually fight somebody who does call himself a professional boxer, is from a fighting family, and is probably Tommy Fury probably has far more sort of traditional boxers' dreams, in the sense of I want to become a world champion. I want to I want to I want to move up the rankings in a particular fashion, probably win the British title.
I would say yes. Tommy Fury probably wants to be British. He wants to probably win the British title. I don't know about world titles for him. Same with Jake. They're both very, very new to the game, so they'd have to be in it a lot longer to kind of show any kind of. I got massive respect for both of them. Both of them deserve a lot of respect. Do you know what I mean? I think it's brave of them both to be taking on this fight, and both sides of it. It's could be potentially humiliating for Tommy Fury, given his family's background. So it's a very brave thing to take on, and he's got to be confident in himself. And obviously,
he's being paid handsomely though.
oh yeah,
You know what I mean?
$2 million. Like, yeah, I think that's a good.
Fight Jake Paul, bro. If you give me $2 million to
I would
fight,
do anything. I'll do anything.
sign the contract, baby. Sign the contract.
No, I'm serious. I'd fucking take him on. But the other thing is as well is if you look at Jake Paul, I have this feeling that once he does get beat and he gets stopped and he gets stomped out, that's going to be the end of the line for him, because I just think his ego is so. I feel like to him, he's so like. He thinks of himself so highly. He thinks he can beat Canelo. He thinks he can be a champion. That when he does get found out, because he's not going to be able to go back down in levels, he's going to have to keep going up in levels. So when he gets a medium kind of level boxer, if he doesn't get found out by Tommy Fury, he's probably his next fight, he's probably going to get knocked out. And I don't know how he's going to recover from it. I don't think he probably will. But, you know, it is what it is. I'm just excited to see it.
Yeah.
Another thing down as well, AJ and Usyk being out in Saudi Arabia doing the press conference. Major money. We're talking about big money with Jake Paul, but then we're on another level when it comes to Usyk and Anthony Joshua out in Saudi Arabia. Mate, huge amount of money that Saudi Arabians have put up to win that fight. They had the press conference there and they had the stare down. What did you make of the
getting Arab money?
Yes, mate. What did you think of the stare down over there?
Yeah. Honestly, it was a really interesting event because like it was like a lot more formal than what you would like see from like boxing events that are like that are held over in sort of Vegas. It had like a different feel to it, didn't it? Like everyone was sort of seated, the people that were in the audience, and it had like a very different sort of look to it. And things like it was interesting because I felt like Joshua tried to almost intimidate Usyk a little bit, which I thought was the wrong sort of approach. But I mean, I think Joshua's been sort of a lot more aggressive in general recently. Obviously, had Student Gate happened, which we talked about. Yeah. So I think he's just in that sort of pissed off. Feels like he's being sort of challenged. He's being written off, maybe potentially, and he's just really up for it. But I think Usyk, the whole world's kind of seen the situation in Ukraine. Put all the politics to the side. He's been in the ring and beat you as well. So it's like intimidating him probably is off the table. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, what are you gonna do different? You know that. So it's it was a really interesting press conference, man.
Well, I said this on the last episode, but I really feel like his best chance for Joshua to win is in the first 5 rounds. I think he's got to put it on him at some point in the first 5 rounds and counter on it and jump on him, because, you know, and like we said before, you know, we talked the other day, he's talking about bringing it back to basics and keeping it simple. That's not really what I mean. I don't want him to be simple. Do you know what I mean? I want him to go in and be heavy-handed, but I also want him to be smart about it. And I want him to have, I'm hoping that him and Robert Garcia have studied the way Usyk fights and looked at his movements, what he kind of does, you know, because we know for a fact Usyk studied Joshua in the first fight because we saw he had an answer to everything and he was there on the counter. And Usyk's quicker than Joshua as well. So he's really up against it. It's going to be a tough fight. You know, Usyk seems a lot more relaxed, which is dangerous to me. You know, Joshua seems more pent up and angry. You know, he's giving that stare down. Like when they're in the ring together in Saudi Arabia, Usyk's dancing with the kids in Saudi Arabia before they have the promo picture where they're sort of standing next to each other in the ring.
Usyk is a phenomenon. So interesting because what you said there, I totally agree with. Joshua does feel so sort of tensed up, and I think everything that's kind of going on in the background with Usyk, it's like he's almost sees this for what it is. It's just, you know, he's so relaxed, he's so calm. I loved what he said as well. He said it in Ukrainian, and then his man on the left of him, translated it for him, and it was like, I'm not really about making these loud, bright speeches. All I ever do is be with my boxing, and he does really have that attitude. He's always like dancing. He's always like sort of happy. And you know, I just think
he's crazy.
Joshua seems a lot more sort of aggressive. You know, a lot more pent up, and it's it's going to be very difficult for him because he's in there with someone who is cold-blooded and sort of cerebral. So he can't just go in there and think I'm just going to throw caution to the wind. It's Joshua seems to be sort of the one that has the weight of the world on his shoulders when really it should be Usyk. So it's interesting to see that dynamic kind of play out. And I'm really excited for this fight, man.
Yeah, and I think it was interesting because I think they didn't really make too much of a spectacle about the Ukraine stuff going on in Ukraine, which I think is obviously an advantage to Joshua, because before when we were talking about it, we thought it was going to be a whole, Ukraine versus the world. This is us fighting for freedom, but they haven't really played too much into that, into the press conference. Maybe it was because it's in Saudi Arabia, like you were saying, it was a lot more formal. It doesn't have the same kind of relaxed vibe that it does in Vegas, and they're just kind of getting used to doing sporting events as well over there. And it's the culture as well. The culture is obviously different. Saudi Arabia, there's a different vibe to it, so it's completely different kind of feel. But yeah, Joshua's obviously quite friendly with some of the sheikhs over there as well, so I feel like he feels more comfortable fighting over there. Another thing I noticed, I don't know if you noticed this, but when they were kind of stood next to each other, Usyk looks like he's kind of lost a bit of, he's put on a bit of maybe, and he's not as toned as he was for the first fight. Probably I'm sort of thinking too much into it, but I don't know if you noticed that. But
I'll be honest, I didn't physically notice. Yeah. I mean, Joshua was bigger than him last time, and Joshua's always like stacked.
Yeah, that's so the thing that you noticed the hand size. They were standing next to each other, like Josh was.
Yeah, I noticed that.
He just looks a lot bigger, and the thing is that Usyk just doesn't seem phased, mate. He just looks so calm, so relaxed, and I think it's just going to be I can't wait for this. This is going to be exciting to watch. But also it doesn't surprise me if. Obviously everyone thinks that Usyk's just going to win.
I loved his bucket hat as well.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Very like throwback to the 90s. That wasn't it?
very, very sort of just chilled out. Sort of, I'm rocking a bucket hat to this massive event.
Yeah. I wonder how much he's making. I don't even know how much money Usyk's going to make in the rematch, but I think he's going to make more than Joshua, because that was written into the contract, I believe. So, he seems very, very relaxed.
He definitely deserves it, man. He put on a fantastic performance last time. He gave Joshua home advantage, probably rightly so as well, because Joshua was the big star and everything like that. So Usyk didn't have as big of a profile. Mm-hmm. And it's like Saudi Arabia's kind of still home, like it's more neutral, but it's kind of still home turf for Joshua a little bit.
Well, I mean, they could have had it in Ukraine, so
no.
It is what it is, and I'm excited for that, mate. Some big fights coming up around the corner. Eggington this weekend, that's going to be a mega one, and then obviously we've got these big ones in July, and then later down the line in August. It's all kicking off, and the summer's out. Barbecue season. I can't wait to have a barbecue myself. So that's been a good one, mate, and that's been another episode of Another Round. I'm the most brutal